When he came out against COVID vaccines and lockdowns in 2021, Edward Fox startled supporters. That was only the start, though. When he turned down movie opportunities in 2025 due to awakened script alterations, he made headlines once more. Then followed the death rumors, which he had to refute himself. In a significant libel case, his nephew Laurence Fox lost, settling $180,000 for unfounded charges. Regarding Hollywood's most important secret, Edward has now revealed something that most performers never publicly acknowledge. Finally, the full story of what goes on behind closed doors is out. On April 13, 1937, in Chelsea, London, Edward Fox was born. His life was enmeshed in drama, secrets, and familial strife from the minute he was born. His father was a theater agent named Robin Fox. In October 1935, he wed Angela Worthington, an actress. However, Robin said something to Angela that would haunt her long after Edward was born. He declared that he would never be loyal. And he meant it. Following one romance after another, Robin also had a lengthy relationship with Rosalind Chateau, who gave birth to a son named Daniel in 1948. Many thought the father was Robin. The situation didn't end there. Robin's friendship with Princess Marina, Prince George's widow, was among his most startling. It was more than just rumors. The already disorganized family tale took on an odd and unsettling royal twist as a result. Feminine playwright Frederick Lonsdale was the father of Edward's mother, Angela. However, even that had a shadow. She was born without a husband. In 1927, her father established a reputation for himself by penning plays such as The Lady of Scandal. The closeness of his stories to his own family, however, was unknown to others. The same social conflicts, affairs, and lies that Edward was born into characterized them. Edward's family relocated to Sussex during World War II in order to avoid the bombs in London. When he was a little boy, he witnessed bombs dropping, which caused him to have nightmares and influenced his reserved, quiet nature. Beginning at the age of 13, he attended Harrow School in the early 1950s. He performed poorly on his schoolwork. Even though he only received 3% in maths on his admission exam, his father's influence allowed him to get in. He disliked the way drama was taught, even if he liked learning German and French. He disliked how the institution prioritized tradition over invention and thought the acting classes were dull. Even though Winston Churchill paid the school 2 visits during Edward's stay, he was unimpressed. He quit early in 1955 because he was fed up with the strict atmosphere, but he wasn't expelled. When he turned 18 that year, he enlisted in the Army for national duty. Between 1955 and 1957, Edward was in the military. He failed to fulfill his dream of becoming an officer in the Coldstream Guards. So instead he joined the Loyalist Regiment. It was then claimed that he was in fact a member of the Coldstream Guards. In any case, his service in the Army differed greatly from his privileged education. Despite the fact that the discipline went against his artistic nature, he genuinely appreciated it. He began trying out for acting parts at the age of 20 after completing his duty. Despite his lack of aptitude, one director noted that Edward enjoyed giving theatrical remarks in public. He was once fired from his position at Marks & Spencer for wearing a loud checkered suit. It was another indication that Edward didn't belong in the mainstream, but that position didn't last. In an attempt to train as an actor, he enrolled in the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, RADA, in 1958. He was 21 years old. Although several of his contemporaries, such as Albert Finney, would go on to achieve fame, Edward left the school quickly. He thought he wasn't getting much aid from the school. He continued to use Clifford Turner's vocal lessons for the remainder of his career because he loved them. In 1959 or 1960, he left RADA and began giving performances in tiny theaters. He purchased a striped outfit from Henry Poole & Collins the same year for $47.14, most likely for an audition. He took up residence in Ockenden, a little cottage in Sussex, and persisted in giving talks to anybody who would listen while strolling throughout the city. Though not yet well known, he was gaining knowledge. He made ends meet in the early 1960s by working as a server in London theaters. Along with doing odd jobs, he made an effort to remain close to the stage industry. People were always chatting, and Edward listened in silence to find out how the company operated. Although there was never any evidence that he had witnessed something dreadful, such as casting couch situations, he made a self-promise to never fall into those traps. In the movie The Mindbenders, he had a brief uncredited role in 1962. Later that year, he had an uncredited appearance in The Loneliness of the Long-Distance Runner. At 25, he was making ends meet while making slow progress. He also traveled to Paris that year, which would have a profound impact on his life. Edward learnt about the French New Wave film trend when in Paris in 1962. Watching films by François Truffaut and others introduced him to a whole new kind of filmmaking. He began to doubt his desire to become an actor as a result. Despite his continued poverty and side occupations, this trip offered him a sense of direction. Upon his return to London, he took up additional duties. The first significant opportunity for Edward Fox came on February 14, 1963. At Wyndham's Theatre, he was an understudy for his brother James in the play The Importance of Being Earnest. He wasn't the star. It didn't go as planned, though. On March 5, the two brothers got into a heated argument during rehearsals. James said a line that Edward didn't like, and they got into a heated argument that nearly destroyed the show. The director noticed that Edward had a strong personality. However, a 2-day standoff resulted from the altercation. The producer, Tennant had to intervene to help them relax. On April 20, Edward finally had the opportunity to perform. He played Algernon, and despite all the backstage drama, he received positive reviews. However, circumstances worsened. Some agents refused to collaborate with him after calling him unprofessional due to the altercation. He was placed on a short-term blacklist. His little attention at the end of the play on May 15 was sufficient to keep him going. Edward had attempted to enter the film industry before then. He acted as an extra in the 1961 film The Loneliness of the Long-Distance Runner, which was released in some locations in 1964 but was shot between June 4 and August 12. He didn't even receive credit. Edward was turned down for a larger role by director Tony Richardson on July 10, 1961, on the grounds that he appeared too upscale for the character. It was painful. Having attended the prestigious Harrow School, Edward didn't suit the movie's working-class tone. But rather than give up, he transformed. He started learning technique acting. He shed 12 pounds to appear tougher by following actual runners and laborers beginning on August 15. He added a sentence during filming on September 3 that wasn't in the script. Richardson yelled at him to stay with the extras. When the movie debuted on September 27, 1962, it brought back memories of Edward's exclusion. He carried that anguish till 1965. He just got $50 for that small job. Finally, in 1967, Edward landed a legitimate TV role. On October 18, he played the lead in the Wednesday Plays The Order episode. Playing a military commander, he concealed his sexual orientation. The 1962 Vassal case and other actual scandals served as inspiration. 3 months had passed since Britain decriminalized homosexuality on July 27 when the program aired. The audience was astonished. By October 20, more than 1,200 complaints had been received. Some letters even made threats against him. He should be hurt, according to one on October 22. He had begun meeting activists in Soho on September 5 and had been preparing for weeks. In his own family, the role led to a major argument. His relations with certain family were severed on November 1. 8 million people watched the show, nevertheless. On October 15, 3 minutes of footage were censored. Despite the success, Edward continued to experience anxiety attacks until the next year. He still had 15 additional offers by December. A brief part in Oh What a Lovely War was given to Edward in 1969. Filming began at Brighton Pier on January 6, and he portrayed a military aide. He got into a furious disagreement with director Richard Attenborough on February 20. Edward desired more robust anti-war sentiment. Filming halted for 4 hours because they were so yelling at one another. He was on the verge of losing his job. Things remained tight even after the director gave in on February 22. Edward's career suffered until 1977, when they reached an agreement. In the Battle of Britain later that year, Edward participated, which was released on September 15, 1969. His character was Archie, a pilot. At Duxford, filming took place from April 1 to July 20. He encountered veterans like Douglas Bader, who had lost 23 friends in the 1940 Air Wars. During a lecture on June 10, he heard that one of the 103 RAF pilots had been killed within a few months. Edward began to have awful dreams. At least 3 evenings a week he would wake up screaming. Due to the severe slowdown caused by bad weather, his contract was extended from 6 weeks to 11 months. Edward's life altered in 1971 when he met the go-between. As a scarred aristocrat, he portrayed Viscount Trimingham. The film was shot in Norfolk and was based on a 1953 novel. It won the Palme d'Or when it debuted at Cannes on May 13. The BAFTA was won by Edward for the March 23, 1972, Best Supporting Actor Award. But off-camera, there was strife. In July 1970, tabloids started circulating rumors of a covert liaison between Edward and his co-star Julie Christie. He had been married to Tracy Reed since 1958, and she was 34. The two were allegedly kissing in between takes. Over 15 top pages carried the rumors. In a BBC interview on August 5, Edward denied it. But there were issues because of the rumors. Then came 1973's Day of the Jackal. The role of Edward was that of a heartless killer. Beginning in August 1972, he met actual former mercenaries in Paris and practiced with a custom .22 rifle for 60 hours. MI5 began to keep an eye on him because it was that believable. They went to the Vienna set on September 15 because they were concerned he was being taught too much about actual terror techniques. At home in London, he received a letter on October 3. It was loaded with a message and a bullet. Join the objectives or cease digging. Marseille sent it. When police discovered it was the work of a fired extra, filming halted for 2 days. That delay cost $45,000. It was released on May 16, 1973. It made $16 million, but it had cost $8 million to make. Over the course of 120 days, Edward's sequences were filmed in 3 different nations. In less than 90 seconds, he even mastered the sniper rifle's assembly. Edward portrayed King Edward VIII in the 1978 film Edward and Mrs. Simpson. It demonstrated the king's devotion to Wallace Simpson and his choice to abdicate the monarchy on December 10, 1936. The program ran from November 8 until December 20. However, royalists were incensed. 200 demonstrators gathered at Elstree Studios on October 15, yelling traitors to the crown. In 1,500 letters, the Monarchist League demanded that the show be cancelled. 5 persons were taken into custody on October 17. Filming took a 3-day break and cost $20,000. Even worse, Edward received a letter telling him to stop performing. Nevertheless, 12 million people watched each show. It was even discussed in Parliament on December 5. The script omitted details such as Edward's Nazi affiliations, according to critics. Finally, in 1979, Edward played Dr. Hendricks in The Cat and the Canary, which he justified in an interview. Filming took place at Pirbright from March 5 to June 20. There was drama on the set. Co-stars Olivia Hussey and Honor Blackman argued about the script. Shooting halted for a week after Hussey left the set on May 15. The expenses increased from $750,000 to $1.1 million, of which $80,000 was spent on overtime alone. Edward replaced him. He spent 3 hours at his hotel on May 22 meeting with both actresses and resolving the conflict. He assured them that they could influence the scenes. By May 25, everything had returned to normal. The film was released on November 1 and made $2.5 million. Hussey didn't like the lesbian overtones in one scene, which led to some of the fight. She requested 10 revisions. Later, Edward said that his Shakespearean quotation rescued the movie. One of Edward Fox's most contentious jobs of his life was in 1982. His role in the movie Gandhi was that of General Reginald Dyer. In Amritsar, Dyer was the actual British officer who ordered the shooting at a peaceful crowd. Approximately 15,000 unarmed people were confined within a walled garden on April 13, 1919. Suddenly, Dyer gave his men the command to shoot. 379 people were officially killed and 1,200 injured. However, in Indian archives, more than 1,000 people were slain. Fox's portrayal of the character was so icy that it made me shiver when he shouted, "Fire," on screen. In 1983, the act earned him a BAFTA nomination, but it also had horrifying repercussions. Fox received 12 death threats in January 1983 while marketing the movie in London. Several letters referred to him as the devil. One even warned that you will be haunted by Dyer's ghost. For 10 nights, Fox was forced to share his hotel room with a security guard. The dread was genuine. The film nevertheless earned $127 million worldwide and won 8 Oscars. Even though it endangered his life, Fox later claimed that it was his most significant role. The Dresser, which was released in 1984, stars Fox opposite Albert Finney in 1983. During the bombing days of World War II in London, he portrayed Norman, a devoted assistant to an elderly actor. It depicted the craziness of theater life, featuring 17 harrowing practice and breakdown sequences. However, things went too far in February 1983 during a live rehearsal. Staying true to his persona, Finney yelled obscenities at Fox for 15 minutes in a row. He described him as sad, weak, and useless. Fox sobbed. Filming was halted for 2 days. He lost control of his method acting, Finney subsequently claimed. Fox claimed that in order to preserve the scene, he kept quiet. He had to attend therapy, nevertheless, following the shoot. The movie was nonetheless a success. It received 5 Oscar nominations and $5.3 million in revenue. The New York Times reported that the two actors' on-screen relationship felt painfully real, while critics praised their strong chemistry. The Philanthropist, a play by Edward Fox, had its Broadway comeback on March 15, 1986. He portrayed a reserved professor named Philip who was encircled by rowdy, boisterous buddies. 25,000 people attended the play at the Ethel Barrymore Theatre, earning $1.2 million. However, something startling occurred on April 2 during one of the dinner sequences. He was in the middle of a speech when his trousers tore open. Everything was seen by about 1,000 people. For a complete 10 seconds, the theater was frozen. Fox kept the performance going by making up a cue rapidly and leaving the stage. The following day, the story was carried by tabloids. The title for the New York Post said, "Fox's Foxy Flub." After a 20% decline in ticket sales during the first week, the producers considered calling off the performance. However, Fox kept it alive. "My dignity took the hit, but the show must go on," he joked about it in interviews. The excitement was helpful. Subsequently, attendance increased by 15%. It even appeared in a Saturday Night Live parody years later. What began as embarrassment evolved into a theatrical legend. Playing the part of M in Never Say Never Again, Edward Fox also entered the James Bond universe in 1983. The fact that the Bond movie wasn't included in the standard Aeon series made it unique. On October 7, Sean Connery returned as Bond, and the film brought in $160 million worldwide. Fox portrayed Connery's Bond in 9 scenes, all of which were severe and solemn. Tensions, however, simmered behind the scenes. Director Irvin Kershner made adjustments that skewed towards Connery's concept on a day of filming on April 12. Fox was not pleased. He stormed off the site 3 days later, on April 15. He said in front of the crew, "I'm not a puppet," and walked away. 2 days of filming had to be halted, costing almost $200,000. It was Connery who had to soothe him. They had a private conversation. Fox then came back. Later, he attributed it to his worst experience working on a movie set and blamed the lengthy 14-hour days. The picture made $20 million more than the competing Bond movie Octopussy, despite the issues. Notwithstanding the walkout's continued presence in the narrative, Fox's portrayal of M became famous. In Return from the River Kwai, Fox played a British officer at the beginning of 1989. A World War II movie about Allied POWs who built the Thai-Burma Railway. The film was shot in Thailand's dense forests between January 15 and May 20. Construction of its railway had cost more than 12,000 prisoners of war between 1942 and 1943. Fox made every effort, but on March 10, while filming a nighttime scene in Kanchanaburi, he contracted acute malaria after being bitten by mosquitoes. His body temperature reached 104 degrees Celsius. After being taken to a hospital in Bangkok, he was required to stay for 18 days. He dropped 15 pounds. The company had to pay an additional $1.2 million because the shooting was postponed by 5 weeks. In a 1990 interview, Fox subsequently stated, "I believe death was close at hand." Although he saw horrific visions while unwell, the anguish provided his act a compelling element. Although the film only made $4.5 million, it went on to win a BAFTA for sound. People observed that his acting appeared haunted in a way that was brutally true. A British adaptation of Robin Hood, starring Fox as Prince John, was released on May 13, 1991. Compared to Kevin Costner's portrayal, which came out on June 14, a month later, Patrick Bergen's Robin had a darker tone. Earned $390 million. With barely a $15 million budget, Fox's version was difficult to produce. Everything was delayed because John McTiernan, the producer, insisted on reshoots for historical accuracy. Test screening revealed that Fox's portrayal of Prince John was a little too harsh. Out of the 104-minute finished film, 12 minutes of his scenes were removed. Fox claimed that he drew inspiration for his acting from actual royal scandals, such as the 1215 betrayal of Magna Carta. However, his role was buried because the other version was so popular. Nevertheless, it was an opportunity for Fox to attempt something different after years of playing serious drama parts. On December 8, 1996, Fox had an appearance in the television film September. Archie was his role. In the Scottish Highlands, a guy finds himself entangled in a difficult romantic triangle. The most startling aspect was the suicide storyline, in which Jacqueline Bissett's character Pandora kills herself after disclosing she had terminal cancer. A note her character left behind revealed the twist. This topic struck near to home, Fox later stated in an interview conducted in November 1996. In 1951, at the age of 14, his parents were divorced. It was also chaotic, rife with hurt and treachery. James, his younger brother, was just 12 years old. That early life event stuck with him. How graphic the suicide scene should be was a topic of discussion during production. The final release was delayed by 3 months as a result of them having to reshoot some scenes. There were 4.2 million viewers when it aired. It was so heartfelt and real that many were taken aback. The role helped me understand my own family trauma, Fox stated afterwards. Fox made his on-screen comeback in The Importance of Being Earnest in 2002. In a minor homage to his early acting career, he portrayed a shrewd butler named Lane in the May 17 release. However, it wasn't all easy. Fox wanted $500,000 in April 2001, before to the commencement of filming, citing his lengthy and prestigious career, which included a BAFTA victory. The Miramax producers disagreed. Weeks of negotiations resulted in a 6-week delay in filming. Fox ended up keeping $350,000 plus a portion of the earnings. However, just $18 million was made globally from the $15 million movie. Reviewers praised Fox's performance, pointing out that it had the witty humor of Oscar Wilde. However, the backstage drama piqued spectators' attention more. In a subsequent interview, Fox made a joke about it being all serious business. Fox portrayed the colorful character Lord Kilwillie in the BBC series Monarch of the Glen from 2000 to 2005. In 7 seasons, he made 24 appearances. The program focused on a Scottish estate and the people that lived there. The 3rd season was a contentious one. Molly was a widow when Kilwillie proposed to her shortly after Hector's death. Fans were incensed. More than 1,500 letters were written to the BBC in March 2002, expressing insensitivity over the story. To lighten the tone, the writers swiftly made changes to the script. To remedy it, production was even put on hold for 2 weeks. Claiming that his personal life served as inspiration, Fox defended the plot. During a period of intense family strife, he got married in 1973. On average, 7 million people watched the show. And, as a result of the controversy, saw a 15% increase in ratings. By sticking with the program until its conclusion on October 23, 2005, it also helped Fox establish itself as a television mainstay. Something unusual occurred in the British theatre in 2010. The UK saw the start of a one-man act called Sand in the Sandwiches. John Betjeman's life was the subject of the article. There was only one actor on stage, Edward Fox. Every night for about 2 hours. Neither was he young at the time. Even though he was already in his 70s, he continued to do so. He gave it his all each night, delivering poems and sharing intimate tales from Betjeman's life. He made no effort to resemble the heavy-set, bald Betjeman, yet it made little difference. What was important was Fox's ability to convey the poet's spirit, the affection, the charm, and the melancholy that made Betjeman so special. Miss Joan Hunter Dunn and the town clerk's views were his favorites. Because Betjeman talked straight to people's hearts, he claimed, he was unique. In 2017, the production received a rare week-long run at the Theatre Royal Haymarket since it was so well-liked. It was a huge deal for a non-musical. 3 years after the show's 2013 premiere, Edward Fox became a part of the audio drama series Doctor Who. The experience should have been easy, but it became difficult. The BBC had already begun to take action against fan-generated content. They were threatening legal action against those who had produced audio dramas without the proper authorization. Despite not being directly involved in any lawsuit, Edward found himself in the midst of a larger tempest. Some thought it was unjust. They noted that although the BBC was pursuing minor fan projects, it also acknowledged other unofficial efforts. Similar to the 2019 student-led recreation mission to the unknown. Supporters were perplexed. It was obvious that the Doctor Who community was going through an odd and tense period, even though Edward didn't talk about it much. In 2015, Edward resorted to a more sentimental approach. He collaborated with pianist Lucy Parham on A Heart in Exile, Rachmaninoff, an elegy. It recounted the tale of Sergei Rachmaninoff, a Russian composer, who never really came back to his home after leaving it in 1917. Rachmaninoff's eerie piano works were performed by Parham as Edward read letters and diary entries. Together, they produced something strong and silent. Preludes, Etudes tableau, and Moments musico were among the musical selections. Tchaikovsky and Scriabin also contributed some compositions. They recorded it after giving a live performance at St. John Smith Square. Until they heard Edward's voice, many people who might not have understood the suffering behind Rachmaninoff's music were reached by the tour. In 2018, Edward accomplished a very uncommon feat alongside his real-life son, Freddie Fox. He appeared on stage in Oscar Wilde's An Ideal Husband. Edward was 81 years old. The age of Freddie was 39. They also performed as father and son in the play. It was an electric dynamic. The Earl of Caversham, Edward, was a strict man. Lord Goring was portrayed by Freddie as a light-hearted young man with a secret wisdom. Their synergy was well received by the crowd. Edward inquired, "Sir, do you truly always understand what you say?" When Freddie said, "Yes, father, if I listen carefully," the theater burst into laughter. Their closeness made it something special, even if performing 8 times a week was physically taxing for both of them. During the Poetry Hour in 2019, Edward participated. In addition to being poetry readings in public, these served as a means of defending a passion of his: classic ideals, cultural memory, and British poetry. Meanwhile, Laurence Fox, his nephew, was in the news for criticizing cancel culture. In addition, Laurence dubbed cultural leaders woke commissars and founded a political team. Edward avoided discussing politics directly. He chose poetry instead. He felt that only significant action should be taken. He used to say that actors shouldn't play every part. They ought to take an action that will truly benefit society. However, there has also been interest in Edward's private life. When he was just getting started, in 1958, he married actress Tracy Reed. She was only 17. They were lifelong friends even if their marriage terminated in 1961. They never ceased caring, even though Tracy subsequently claimed that their marriage was doomed from the beginning. Their only child, Lucy Arabella Fox, went on to become the Viscountess Gormanston. Tracy went on to marry 3 more times and make an appearance in Dr. Strangelove. She died of liver cancer in 2012 at the age of 70. Edward's relationship with Joanna David has lasted the longest. In 1971, their relationship started. Emilia and Freddie were their 2 children. But after 33 years of dating, they didn't get married until July 2004. Experienced major health issues in 1993, which included brain surgery. Later, she donated to charities that benefit cancer in the brain. After their daughter Amelia rose to fame on Silent Witness, Freddie also pursued acting. However, the Fox family name hasn't always been a source of honor. Laurence Fox, Edward's nephew, lost a significant libel case in January 2024. Following his fraudulent online calls to 2 individuals who were alleged to be rapists, he was sentenced to pay $180,000. According to a drag artist who was one of the males, the backlash was too much. Without providing any evidence, the court declared Lawrence's remarks to be cruel. Later that year, he filed a 5-point appeal of the ruling, but the harm had already been done. The whole Fox family was unnecessarily exposed by the incident. Edward himself garnered media attention in 2021. He expressed skepticism over COVID-19 vaccinations and lockdowns. He disagreed with the idea of isolating healthy people. To someone who had largely avoided politics, this was a strange approach. However, in light of Lawrence's opinions, it wasn't entirely shocking. Still, a lot of people felt let down. The majority of British actors were promoting vaccinations at the time. Edward sounded out of step. In 2025, Edward, who is now 88, spearheaded a demonstration in Wareham. It was about preserving a basic railway crossing that handled 860 daily passengers. A large number were old or disabled. The government intended to replace it with an expensive ramp system that was inaccessible to wheelchairs and strollers. In person, Edward arrived at 11 a.m. together with MP Vicky Slade on February 1st. Media interest was aided by his notoriety. And more than 2,500 signatures were added. He even used the Equality Act to support his claims of discrimination when he challenged officials. The Purbeck Film Festival had an evening with the Fox family on October 18th of that year. Few actors ever openly confessed something like Edward did during the event. Nepotism was one of his topics. Having a well-known family name, he claimed, opened opportunities. Robert Fox's legacy, his brother, and his job as a producer helped younger family members land opportunities that would otherwise be difficult to come by. He didn't dispute it. Indeed, he stated it clearly. Family name familiarity is important. Edward disclosed significantly more in an interview that year. Because the screenplays had been altered with what he referred to as woke changes, he had declined big-budget picture offers. He thought that the characters were no longer authentic to the original tales. Being a part of that was not what he wanted. He believed that older actors were under pressure to take on parts that advanced contemporary goals, but he had the financial means to refuse. He also called cancel culture dumb and inhuman. His health was also the subject of persistent rumors. Social media reported his death in 2025. Edward had to declare that he was still alive and well, but it quickly spread. He attributed the untrue reports to his less public appearances and the disputes pertaining to Laurence. He claimed that these kind of scams were now too prevalent, particularly among elderly performers who don't utilize social media. He had to confront lies, which was annoying, but the silence simply made them more obvious. Despite everything, including poetry, politics, protests, and suffering, Edward Fox has remained true to his core beliefs. He's still picking his parts wisely at the age of 88, speaking up when he thinks something is wrong, and reminding people that living a long life in the spotlight doesn't mean you lose sight of reality.